This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, to check you have the tickets in your wallet first before you drive 2 hours to the big game. Seriously, you had one job. Now the closest you'll get to the 50-yard line is parking lot D. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
It's the Jersey Blitz, NJ.com's high school football podcast. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Jersey Blitz, NJ.com's high school football podcast. I'm Dan Long, and I'm joined alongside by 5 of our NJ.com beat writers in the sport of football here this week as we're breaking down everything around the Garden State Gridiron action. This week, we'll be recapping 2 top 20 games that we saw over the course of the weekend that were great one-point games. We'll also break down a couple top 15 upsets, 2 teams that got knocked down by a couple of upset-minded squads. We'll also take a look at our Week 5 recap notes from our reporters and have a reporter roundtable where each of the guys will talk about some players that have impressed them so far this season. And then we'll end this episode by taking a look at a couple of the big-time plays that have been happening in teams making things happen down the shore while previewing some of our games of the week, including 2 of our games that we'll be broadcasting here this weekend on NJ.com. So to get us going here, I'll bring in a couple of our writers, and Luis Torres, Ryan Patty, and Mike Kinney. And Luis, we're going to kick things off with one of those top 20 matchups where Paramus Catholic won in a wild overtime game against a very game St. Thomas Aquinas side that was close to pulling off the upset.
Yeah, great game. Actually, one of the better ones I've seen this year. I think everybody was kind of curious to see how St. Thomas Aquinas was going to match up, picking up a road game against one of the North Jersey powers. And of course, a program like Paramus Catholic had success over the last decade and a half. The game went to overtime and Paramus Catholic pulled it off 35-34. St. Thomas Aquinas went for 2 for the win. But it was a really back and forth game. And I was really impressed with kind of how St. Thomas Aquinas kind of responded to every punch that PC threw at them. At one point, it was 21-7, and you were thinking, all right, in the third quarter, it's like, all right, maybe here comes PC. They're going to pull away. Kasai Thomas from St. Thomas Aquinas, one of Tariq Holman's young, bright stars. Is going to be a future impact player, and it kind of already is. Returned a kickoff for a touchdown, made it 21-14. Xavier Williams again for PC, who had a tremendous night. 41 carries, 225 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Scored a touchdown, and you're thinking heading into the fourth quarter, Aquinas is down 2 scores, but then they fought back and they clawed their way back. They tie that game at 28. The game goes to overtime. Josiah Zayas gets an interception with less than 10 seconds to go for St. Thomas Aquinas send the game to overtime. And PC just made one more play than Aquinas did that night. But overall, great game. Came away impressed, of course, with Aquinas and Xavier Williams. Again, I don't know if there's one more important player to his guy's team than Xavier Williams, what he's been able to do this year. But I think Mike will touch more on kind of what this means for Aquinas. And of course, Tariq Holman, Aquinas' coach, was telling me after the game that he was proud of the kind of the effort that his kids gave in playing in that platform against one of the North Jersey powers.
Mike Kinney? As Luis Torres was just saying, even though this was a defeat for St. Thomas Aquinas, what does this mean then, grand scheme, for this team that's trying to take that next step as they compete in non-public B?
Yeah, exactly. They want to compete with those top teams in North Jersey, and Tariq Holman knows, and his players have learned, that the only way to do that, to prepare for that, is to actually go out and play them. Now, one thing that's helped St. Thomas this year is in the past years, they've had great records, and then they've gotten into the playoffs, and they've lost basically in the first round. They played very well against DePaul last year, lost a 3-point game, but nonetheless, they've gotten to those games, and they've been a little overmatched against the teams in non-public B because they haven't played that level of competition throughout the season. It's not their fault. It's where they were in their division in the Big Central Central Conference. But this year they're up in the National Silver. They're up playing bigger boys. They're up playing Group 5s, Group 4s, and they've acquitted themselves very well with the experienced team they have. Roman Blanks is an experienced quarterback, and Josiah Zay is a very experienced receiver. They've got a bunch of young kids too. Chukwuma Odo, who is one of them, is a running back who, he's got some impact players, which Luis kind of touched upon. Young kids who Tariq's not afraid to put in the lineup. The one thing about this game was they were there. They got into overtime. They fought back. They got into overtime. They went for the win with the conversion pass after Odo had scored in overtime. Give them credit for that. They didn't want to, try the game, go into next over. They thought they could win the game. Further credit goes, though, to the fact that we can't forget that Chase Young, only a week before, collapsed on the field. A star running back for St. Thomas, their best running back, collapsed on the field against Elizabeth, was rushed to the hospital. He ended up being okay. However, he has not been okayed yet to play football. We don't know yet whether he's going to even play this season. But nonetheless, 1 week after a quite traumatic situation like that, the kids were ready to play, go up and play Paramus Catholic, one of the teams up there in the Super Football Conference that everybody in the state recognizes as the premier conference, the premier grouping in New Jersey. And they went up and almost won the game without Chase and with the memory of that only a week away from these kids. So it's a game that's going to carry them, I think, a long way.
When you talk about non-public B, right now the team to beat is DePaul Catholic, and Ryan Patty, they had their toughest game of the season so far. They've been blowing out the competition all year long. Well, they had to survive a 1-point win on the road at Granitel Stadium in Ramsey against Don Bosco Prep, who now in the last 2 weeks, Bosco has seen losses against number 1 Bergen Catholic, number 2 DePaul Catholic. But for DePaul, what is the most impressive part about this team under Nick Campanelli, and why are a lot of people in Spartan country feeling this might be the best team in school history right now?
Yeah, so, and you mentioned Coach Campanelli. He told it to me after the win against Good Counsel, and he said, when you take one thing away from us, we have another thing that can beat you, and his quarterback, Derek Zamet, echoed it on Friday. Bosco game planned against Nolan James Jr. He only had 62 yards on 15 carries, a very uncharacteristic day for him, but they just loaded the box against him, and they were like, you know what, we're going to dare Zamet to beat us. And he did. He had a great game, a great dual threat game. He had a bunch of double-digit runs, yardage-wise. I think he had, over 40 yards rushing. He had 216 passing yards for 216 passing yards on 14 of 19 passing. He had 2 touchdowns, both to Elijah Burris. Burris looked like the elite receiver that we know he is, and it was big because Desi Jones was banged up in the game, and they leaned on Burris a little more. They leaned on Michael Knox and Mason James, and defensively, Anthony Natoli again steps up, makes a big play. He picked off Dylan Rona on a pass he was trying to get rid of and returned it for a touchdown. Then the defense got a stop late in the game to put the game away deep in its own territory. And, this game got tight. I mean, the Good Counsel game was tight at times, but this was a back-to-the-wall moment for DePaul, and they came through, and they're 6-0 for the first time in 16 years.
And it's back-to-back years they've had big wins against Don Bosco Prep that they're hoping is going to now start to echo throughout the rest of the season. Bringing Luis back in for Bosco, another what could have been moment for them. Again, it's not really good when you're having the gauntlet like they have in their schedule of they're having to play the top 3 New Jersey teams in 3 consecutive weeks. A couple weeks ago against their arch rival Bergen Catholic, they lose by 4, then 1-point loss at home against DePaul. What does this now mean with this another close loss here for the Ironmen, Luis? And do they still have that confidence heading into that game against St. Joe's this weekend?
Yeah, we'll definitely touch on the St. Joe's game here later on. Another big test for the Ironman and Coach Dan Sabella. I think if you're Sabella, I think you're thinking you guys are going to be okay. I think you're close to breaking through. I mean, to hold a DePaul offense to 21 points, I mean, we've kind of seen them, and I think they're the best offense in the state in terms of kind of the skill position. I mean, they're just loaded all over the place. And I think it goes back. I think there's a couple of people I spoke with kind of say, all right, is Don Bosco for real coming out of that Bergen Catholic game? You know how that game went with the rain and all that 5 turnovers, but for their defense again to basically hold DePaul to just 2 scores. Of course, Anthony Natoli had that pick 6, which was ended up being the difference, and kind of some operational issues for Bosco, kind of on special teams again on a snap and then that pick 6. I think Sabella's going to have to really make sure these guys kind of stay confident, knowing that, hey, we can play with anybody in the state, and we're just right there. We just need to clean up some of those mistakes. And you know what? If they do it on Friday against Joe's, they have a shot to win that game and kind of knock off one of the top 3 teams. I think right now, Bosco is really close to breaking through. They just need to clean up some stuff and get a break or 2 that goes their way.
Now we shift gears to the teams that did not fare as well in the top 20 this past week, as there were a couple upsets that were brewing in the Garden State. Bringing back again Ryan Patty to talk about one that echoed throughout all of Newark, Jersey. Ramapo, that had a tough go of it to start off their season, as I even saw in person against Ultapan. Well, they came out of nowhere and handed Passaic Tech, who we've been regarding as maybe the top public school in North Jersey, they handed Passaic Tech a loss in this last game.
Yeah, I'm actually not all that surprised. I mean, it's a little surprising, but I'm not entirely surprised. And that's not a dig at Passaic Tech, because we've talked about how good they are, and we think they can make another Group 5 title appearance. But this is more about Ramapo kind of getting its due and knocking down the door in a big spot. And you can tell how jacked up this team has been these last 2 wins they got, because 0-3 is not acceptable at Ramapo. I mean, that hadn't happened since 2007. And coming into this one, I would have told you it's a trap game. And their offense is also a style Passaic Tech's not that used to game planning against. It's a lot of RPO and hurry up. And the only team that Passaic Tech sees that kind of does that is West Orange, and you saw how close that game was in week 1. So, and I mean, it's tough for any team to defend that offense, because it's 4 quarters of just hurry up, and you're getting tired in the second half. And so I'm not all that shocked by this, and I think Passaic Tech's going to be just fine. And this is, like I said, more about Ramapo breaking down the door here and restoring their postseason goals.
Bringing in for the first time in this Jersey Blitz episode is Bill Evans. And Bill, we saw a top 10 team go down to an upset with 2 parochial powers in South Jersey, as St. Augustine was bested by Holy Spirit. How surprising was that to you?
Mildly, but again, it's a rivalry game, and they tend to be very competitive. And we knew Holy Spirit was good. That they lost their opening game of the season at the Battle of the Beach to Millville 35-0. I think they fell off a lot of people's radars at that point, but that they've been kind of grinding back into the conversation. And a couple weeks ago, they had a really impressive win at Camden, holding a very offensively skilled team in the Panthers to 12 points. So you knew that they were capable. You knew it was going to be this kind of game, kind of low scoring. St. Augustine again has a very good defense. Both teams are solid, but not overly dominant offensively. St. Augustine going up 10-0, taking a 10-0 lead into the fourth quarter. You would figure, because of how strong their defense is, that they would be able to hold that. But, credit to the Holy Spirit. Ty Costabile threw a couple touchdown passes. Emmanuel Torina ran for over 100 yards, and they were able, to kind of, beat them out there at the end. So I think it was kind of what we expected in terms of the type of game. Yeah, definitely. I think most of us thought that St. Augustine would pull it out, but not a total surprise, just because, we know how competitive these games typically are, and also that these are 2 pretty good teams.
So we touch upon the top 20 teams that were going against one another, a couple of those upsets involving top 20 teams. Now let's put a bow officially on week 5 with our recap notes. And we're going to bring in for the first time here in our podcast, Joe Zadalis. And Joe, a lot of things were happening down the shore in this past week. What about Shore Regional, as they put on a big-time performance against New Egypt in a matchup of previous unbeatens?
Yes, that's right. It was for small school supremacy in the Shore Conference. Shore Regional under Donnie Klein, who was at Ocean Township for 17 years. Shore, for the last previous 24 seasons, ran the wing T. A run first, throw much later offense. Well, Donnie came in and he's putting in multi-wide receiver packages and throwing the ball around the yard, and they've become a very balanced team. They run downhill. Their linebackers fly downhill on defense. We just never got anything going, whether to run or to pass. And one of the most interesting things for me was watching Josh Moeller, their quarterback, who for his previous 3 years in high school did nothing but hand off, and how well he threw the ball and how good his decision-making was and how he spread the ball around. I think he threw to 8 different receivers in this offense now, where he is at the controls of a wide-open passing game. They didn't take a lot of shots down the field, but they got wide receivers in space, and they let them run for yards after catch and after contact. Moeller was 20-24, a school record 254, and that's 5 games into the Donnie Klein era. They set a school record, and he had a couple of touchdown passes. And the other team, I think, that is making people stand up and take notice, Dan, is Middletown North. They are 5-0 for the first time since 1983. And Steve Bush, who, again, is a passing guru, has this offense that can run and throw. Their top runner is 5'1". We've talked about him before. And they're playing sensational defense. Jason Glesman, the former head coach at Keyport, has taken over that defensive unit, and they had their hands full. They held St. John Vianney's Abdul Toure to 91 yards, and that kid had 3 200 yards in a row. So it was a great effort by the Lions, Dan.
And some exciting finishes as well, Joe, around the Shore Conference. 2 games came down to game-winning field goals to decide them. Yes,
Matt Luzio, and that's his second game winner. If fans didn't know, he kicked the field goal in a 3-0 win over Middletown South. And Joe Mazzillo at Jackson Memorial, with about 4 minutes left, he kicked the 33-yarder. And Jackson has 3 wins this year. They're 3-2, all 3 on Mazzillo field goals.
And Mike Kinney, bringing you back here, what did you see in some of your recap of those last week, looking at a couple of the games, not only from just the Big Central Conference, but also around Essex County?
Yeah, first of all, Somerville against Summit. There's a game I went to. I thought it was going to be an outstanding game, maybe down to the wire. And Somerville, probably, I would say without a doubt, the most impressive outing I've seen from any team all season pertaining to the competition they played. Summit came in undefeated. Somerville came in undefeated. And Somerville came in just lights on fire from the beginning. They led Summit 41-0 at the half. It was a running clock throughout the entire second half. Not a starter played in the second half for Somerville. Just a remarkable outing. Brendan Pacheco in charge at the quarterback, passed for 205 yards, 4 touchdowns, rushed for a touchdown. Terrell Mitchell was unstoppable as a running back. Max Nuzzi and Brady Shire showed their abilities as receivers to get behind defenders. Just overall, and a great defensive performance as well. Just overall, Somerville looked like an overpowering football team, 6-0 now. Playing well, and a team in Union County doing the same kind of thing at the Group 2 level. Johnson is now 5-0, averaging 35 points a game, with a group that won last year with a lot of non-seniors, and now these guys are seniors, and they are just unstoppable so far. Robert Gallagher at quarterback has done a tremendous job. Joshua Maltez Torres running the ball, and Anthony Ayer catching the ball, and Ryan George running the ball. Just real good balance on this team, and they've got a great test this week. They've had good tests the last couple of weeks, and nobody's been able to stop them, but they played Delaware Valley, a team that's only lost 1 game, and their only loss is 7-0 to Burnett, so that's going to be an outstanding game this week. And Plainfield weren't sure what they were going to be early in the season. They looked like they were struggling a little bit. They've won 3 of their last 4 games now. They're looking a lot more like the Plainfield team of last year. I think committing to Kamal Lowry as the quarterback has really helped them. It's allowed Alameen Watkins he played a lot of quarterback with Lowry in the past, to just concentrate on being a receiver, being a runner occasionally, and especially being a really tough defensive end. And Joel Cordoba, who I've thought for the last couple of years is one of the top receivers and defensive backs in the conference. He's really showing his stuff and why he's going to Kent State to play football. E.J. Brown at running back. They're playing very good football. It's good to see at Plainfield because that was a program that had been down for a while. And with James Williams as the head coach, they've been back up the last couple of years, and it looks like they're ready to give some people trouble. And a game, not a game, but two games I'm really looking forward to see what happens this week one is a big Central team against a Super Football Conference team. It's Roselle, 0-6 against Newark Collegiate, 0-5. And the other game that I've got my eye on, and I'm actually going to be going to see on Saturday, is Westside. Got their first win this past week. They're 1-5 against Barringer at 0-5. And the reason I point those games out because this is a great sign of what the super conferences are capable of doing now, which with the smaller conferences, they really weren't because you were kind of hamstrung within the group you played. And it was the same teams over and over and over again every season. If you were a larger team in one of those conferences that had maybe a weaker football program, you just struggled for years and years. And now every 2 years, they're able to shift divisions, give teams a chance to get into divisions where it's more competitive and they can play teams they can win. And this is not a trophy for everybody kind of scenario. It's a competitive thing that gives kids a chance to play against teams that are more like the ones they're playing and really makes a week of practice fantastic. If you're 0-5 and you're going to play a team that's 5-0, you are really having a tough time. And no matter what you say, no matter what you yell in the locker room, believe me, you in the back of more than half the kids on those teams, they're feeling we're going to get killed this week. We're going to kill this. This really stinks. And that's the attitude you have, even though you don't want it. Here, Collegiate and Roselle are going into this week of practice thinking, we're winning this game. This is fantastic. We got a chance to win this game. Same thing with Westside and Barringer. This will be their competition for the king of Brick City. We know Weequake, we know Shabazz, we know Eastside is up, we know Central is having a great season. Those four teams in Newark are having great years. These two guys are not, but they're going to this weekend because somebody's coming out the winner at School Stadium, and it's going to be fantastic. So I love that kind of scenario, and that's a credit to what's happened in the Super Football Conferences and able to let these teams have moments of competition like that. It's great.
Now it's a fun time with everything in the background from the last week. Get a chance to talk to each one of our 5 NJ.com writers this week to have a little bit of a roundtable and see what players have impressed each of them so far this season in New Jersey high school football. So we'll lead off here with Bill Evans. Bill, who's been a player that has really impressed you so far down in South Jersey?
For me, it's R.J. Blount, a junior running back at Pennsauken. He had transferred from Collingswood, where he'd had a couple nice games last year. He is a Pennsauken resident, so he's going back to his home school. And, Pennsauken, Elijah Jennings was a tremendous running back there, had over 1,100 yards and 16 touchdowns last year, but he graduated. Karan Ali, who was their number 2 back, transferred to Winslow. I don't think they had a player returning that actually had positive rushing yards on the season, so they needed somebody to step in. Week 1, he got 66 yards against Washington Township. Then from there, 145 and 2 touchdowns against Highland, 218 and 3 touchdowns against Vineland, 346 and 6 touchdowns against Eastern. This last week, it was a little bit more of a grind for him against a tough Camden Eastside defense. He ended up with 89 yards and 1 score. But, next week he could go over 1,000 yards for the season. Pennsauken has now won 4 straight since the opening loss to Washington Township, and R.J. Blount has been the big reason why.
Joe Zadalis, who's been catching your eye in the Shore Conference so far this season?
Well, Dan, down here at the Shore, the craziest division is Class C North, and there are 4 teams with only 1 loss in the division. And the player who's really, I think, been one of the more consistent performers in the Shore Conference this year is Holmdel's junior quarterback, Jack Cannon. Dual threat. He played in an option game. He can throw the ball a little bit. Last week, he went over 1,100 yards rushing. He's also over 3,000 career yards passing. And I think it's going to be interesting. There's a few games in that division this week. Eddie Guerreri, the longtime Manalapan coach, now at Wall, goes back to Manalapan. We saw St. John Vianney get off to the great start. They've cooled off a little bit. But just sitting there quiet, just almost biding their time to a degree is Holmdel, and the guy who makes that motor run is Jack Cannon.
Luis Torres, who has stood out to you so far in covering this 2024 season?
Yeah, I'm going to go with a player who probably just doesn't have the numbers compared to some of the other guys that the other guys are going to mention. That's Chris Kaiser over at Morris Knolls. He's Morris Knolls' quarterback, and he's only thrown for 207 yards this year, and he's only rushed for 302. But what makes him so important is he's the quarterback, and what Brian Gallagher, who's a Morris Knolls alum, his offense is the spread option offense, which is basically what the service academies run at the next level, basically your triple option offense. And to be a quarterback in that offense, you have to be a smart football player, because you got to know and recognize what the defense is doing, either to keep it, to pull it, to pitch it, or to hand it off. And Morris Knolls is 5-0, and just coming off a huge win against Mount Olive to kind of at least clinch a share of that division, which is arguably the best division in Morris County. And kind of just what Chris Kaiser has been able to do this season, his first year as the quarterback of the offense for Brian Gallagher, who had regional title at Boone a few years ago, kind of running that offense. I mean, Chris Kaiser's done a heck of a job running that offense so far, and he's coming off a huge game. He ran for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he also made some plays on defense. He had 6 tackles and a tackle for loss. So he's one of the guys that's kind of really impressed me so far, based on kind of being that guy running that show in that offense.
Ryan, Patty, with your time around the Super Football Conference, who's somebody that has been really impressive to you so far this season?
My guy has been Max Delegard from Wayne Hills, and Wayne Hills has kind of been one of the stories of the Super Football Conference. They're 4-2 now, and I mean, it's been a while since you could say that. And Max transferred in from DePaul after his sophomore year, and he's just kind of changed the trajectory of this program. Last week in the win over Wayne Valley, which they hadn't beat in the last 3 tries, he had 11 catches for 144 yards and a touchdown, and they use him in a lot of ways. He's a receiver, but he's kind of a do-it-all. You know, they split him out wide. They put him in the slot. They run pop passes, other jet stuff. You know, they put him in the backfield, and he kind of just does everything they need him to do. On the season, he has 22 catches for 391 yards and 4 touchdowns, has a kick return for a touchdown, and he has just, you know, can't teach speed that his head coach in Wayne Demikoff just gets the most out of him. And, you know, it's been a lean couple years for Wayne Hills, but this program's finally turning it around, and Max is a big reason why.
And Mike Kinney, who's been standing out to you in the Big Central Conference?
Yeah, I'm going to be a little hog here, Dan. I'm going to take 2 guys because I just can't separate them. They're twin brothers, Derek and Brian Anderson at Woodbridge High School. They're off to a 6-0 start. Derek is the quarterback, and Brian is a wide receiver and a defensive back. Whenever you have 2 guys who have been playing a long time and are quarterback and receiver and come to a program, that's dangerous. When you've got 2 guys who grew up in the same house for all those years and have countless times throwing the ball to one another, and obviously you're twins, it's a very scary combination, and it has been for the last couple of years, and especially this year for Woodbridge. And one of the things that I want to point out about these guys that they're doing so well is they're doing it with a different offense and under a different head coach. Joe LaSala had been the Woodbridge coach, and they played more of a spread offense, and Derek flourished in that, and Brian obviously did, as well as many other receivers in the Woodbridge system in that offense. But now they're running a triple option, so Derek has to make different decisions now that he didn't have to make so much in the spread before as far as the running game goes, and he's doing a brilliant job of working with the running backs and also running himself, but getting his brother involved. And there are times, and it's not so much the numbers, because the numbers are very good. Derek has already passed for almost 800 yards and 10 touchdowns this season, and Brian has caught 25 passes for almost 500 yards and 5 of those touchdowns. Their career numbers are strong too. But more importantly, it's what they've done in clutch situations when it's needed. One of the most dangerous plays in the Woodbridge book is Derek waggling left and then his brother running the dig route. And when he comes across the field, you can just watch. If you watch it even live, you can see Brian reading his brother's shoulders, reading his brother's speed, reading whatever the mannerism in the rush, to know exactly how fast he has to go to get himself into a position to be open for a big pass. You see that kind of connection that no defensive coordinator can stop. And it's brutal. Along with some other skill, that's what has Woodbridge out to a 6-0 lead. These twins are just on fire.
So now we've looked at some of those big-time players that have impressed so far. Now we get into the meat of the matter here this upcoming weekend and looking at some of the top games from all around New Jersey. And we will be down the shore on Thursday night for the battle for shore supremacy. Rumson-Fair taking on Red Bank Catholic and Joseph Dallas. This one we were thinking about for the last couple of weeks based on certainly when I've seen Rumson-Fair in person. I even alluded to this matchup back early on in the season after I was calling the Don Bosco Prep versus RBC game, getting ready to head back to Count Basie Field this Thursday. This has the makings of a great one come Thursday night.
Oh, absolutely. I think this has been circled on a lot of people's calendars. If you're going to park near the field, if you're going to park near Count Basie, you better get there early. Otherwise, you'll be on the other side, of the highway, parking there. But, you know, what I'm interested in, Dan, what has me so inquisitive about this game is I'm not really sure how good either one of them is. And I say this, obviously, they're two of the premier programs in the Shore Conference. Each of them has been to the last two group championships, Rumson in 2 and RBC and non-public B. But, you know, they haven't been challenged for the most part. You know, since its opening day win over Point Borough, 41-28, where Rumson really struggled to get stops in the second half. They've only defeated teams with a 10-13 record, outscoring them 146-20. Meanwhile, Red Bank Catholic, of course, had the 2-loss opener, including the 44-0 loss to Bosco. But the teams that RBC has played are, you know, haven't been very productive. So, and they've outscored those teams 124-14. But what we are going to get in this game, and why I think it would be a terrific game to watch for our NJ.com subscribers, is the quarterback play. Again, two guys who have been to 2 straight group championships, have their eyes set on the third, are both playing at elite levels. Frankie Williams of RBC is a 65% career passer. He's got 48 touchdowns, so he's coming up on the 50 TD mark. And in his career, in 400 attempts, has only 6 interceptions. And then on the other side is Owen O'Toole. He's just been amazing. He's accurate, and he runs that offense brilliantly. But I think it's going to come down to, Dan, is the run game. You know, at one point earlier in the year, RBC was only averaging like 1.5 yards a carry. But Mike Lang and his staff matter of fact, both staffs, Dan, are good at is tinkering during the course of the year. Every coach says, you know, we want to get better every week. Well, these are 2 coaching staffs that do that. So Red Bank Catholic has found a running back that it likes, Jordan Mosenthine. He's a sophomore. He didn't get a lot of carries in the first few games, but of late, in the last 4 games, he's got 222 yards and 4 touchdowns. RBC, just like Rumson, needs to run the ball just a little bit to keep that defense honest and open up some space down the field for Frankie Williams. And then on the other hand, Rumson-Fair, Kellen Murray has been terrific the last few weeks. He's really developed into a yards after contact machine. And I think that's where it's going to be won. The team that runs the ball the best I think is going to win that game. It's going to be won in the trenches. And right there, in my opinion, I give Rumson just a little edge up front. And then I think a little bit of an edge in the run game. And as a result, I think it's going to be, you know, a relatively close football game, but, you know, it's going to be played with a ton of intensity, Dan. These schools are only 4.1 miles apart. They know each other well. It has really developed into one of the finest rivalries in the Shore Conference. And again, I think it's going to be a great game to watch either in person or on our live stream.
I was just about to ask you, Joe, like, for people who aren't from around the shore, can you describe what this game means to their respective communities? Because Rumson-Fair hasn't beaten RBC in the last 3 seasons, and they're usually there at the end of the season competing for their state championship in Group 2. What does this game mean? It's a rivalry game, and for trying to have not only the bragging rights, but also trying to get ready for the postseason.
Well, it's huge. Like I said, you know, their kids kind of hang out in the same places. They go to the same beaches, boardwalks. things like that. And I think it's a big deal because, Red Bank Catholic is a program that draws from all over Monmouth, Ocean, and even some Middlesex kids. And, if you're Rumson, this is a game you really want to win because you don't want some of your guys going down Ridge Road and going into downtown Red Bank. And these are two terrific coaching staffs, two proud communities, and they play this game to the hilt. But over the previous 3 years, Red Bank Catholic always had a slight edge in explosiveness, whether it was at the running back spot or the wide receiver spot. And this year, RBC, at least to me, has a little bit of an edge there. So I think there's a lot at stake here, bragging rights and, dare I say, draw to a non-public program. So I expect it to be a great game, hard-hitting. Both teams are very physical. They play that kind of game. And again, I'm very anxious to see how it unfolds.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to calling that game on Thursday night at 7 p.m. You can watch that game, obviously, here on NJ.com/watch. Another game that we will be having the honor of broadcasting is going to be a doozy, one of the best rivalries in the North. It's going to be St. Joe's Regional traveling to Ramsey to take on Don Bosco Prep. And Luis Torres, again, it's been close but no cigar for Don Bosco Prep the last couple of weeks, losing against Bergen Catholic, losing at home last week against DePaul Catholic. How can the third time be a charm and maybe take down the Green Knights for a signature win?
Yeah, talk about it. They're going to be facing a different style of quarterback a little bit in Joe's Lamar Best. Go from facing Dom Campanelli, who's kind of more of a pocket passer, who's going to stay in the pocket, can do some stuff with his legs, and then you face Derek Zammit last week, who's got some size and definitely have some power run game. But Lamar Best is kind of a true dual threat quarterback. I mean, he rushed for 5 touchdowns a couple of weeks ago in that win against Paramus Catholic. So I'm curious to see kind of how Aiden O'Neill, defensive lineman, Matt Octopinti, Kyle Ramos, Bosco's linebackers, and kind of Mekhi Allen, who's kind of in the box safety, has been playing a little bit more linebacker lately, kind of how the defensive staff kind of uses them, kind of maybe play some more contain against Joe's and against Lamar Best. But you also have to watch out for guys like Nate Bailey, receivers, kind of one of the more explosive guys in the state. Doesn't have the size you probably want in kind of a prototypical receiver, but he's probably like 5'8", 5'9", but speed to burn. And you also have Jovan Williams and Mekhi Rosenthal as well, kind of on the outside. So it's going to be, I'm interested to see kind of how Bosco kind of game plans for kind of Lamar Best, and probably, like I mentioned, probably playing a little bit more contained to try to keep him in the pocket and make him beat you by throwing the ball down the field. And offensively, Bosco's going to have to take care of the ball. Kind of alluded to it earlier. We've seen it the last couple of weeks, kind of some ill-timed turnovers, both on special teams and on offense. But establishing the run game with Dante DeLuca running behind that offensive line, which is led by Rhett Morris and Matt Maietti, will go a long way to kind of control the clock and keep Joe's offense kind of on the bench.
Ryan Patty, St. Joe's is coming into this game off a bye week. They have great resume wins against St. Peter's Prep, Paramus Catholic earlier this season. What do you expect from the Green Knights heading into a hostile environment? And if there's ever been a case of a team desperate for a win, it's going to be Don Bosco at this point. What does St. Joe's have to look forward to on Friday night in a game that'll be here on NJ.com?
Yeah, I think Luis mentioned it best with Lamar Best. I think he's going to have to play a good game because it took a very good game, like I mentioned, for Derek Zammit to win last week. And the good news is that all Lamar has done is play good games. And he's doing what he did at Willingboro, but against some of the best teams in the state now. And that's absolutely incredible because not every athlete can do that. And he's got an amazing cast of receivers and pass catchers that Luis has talked about in the past. And Rutgers commit and stud running back John Forrester, we figure, is going to be healthier than he's been in the previous weeks. And for Bosco, we'll see about Devin Sissler. We're not sure if he's going to play or not, but the quarterback play from Dylan Rona has been more than serviceable in the time he's seen in pretty much the 6 quarters that he's played. So I think they're good enough to win with either quarterback. And I think if there's one thing to watch for with St. Joe's is that St. Francis, in the game I was at, ran the ball on them a lot in the second half. And granted, that's St. Francis, but it kind of showed that Joe's could be maybe a little vulnerable with their run defense. And Coach Hoffman told me after that game that, for his team to win big games, they have to make big plays in big spots. And that same sentiment goes for Bosco. Can the defense get a turnover from Lamar Best when the game's on the line? Can the offense hit a big play with the game on the line. And they had the opportunity to do that in the past 2 weeks and didn't come through. But, maybe the third time can be a charm here. And I guess we're going to find out on Friday, and I'm going to be there and you're going to be there, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Friday night, 7 p.m., Granite Hill Stadium in Ramsey. If you can't make it out there or you don't want to fight for a parking spot, settle in NJ.com/watch, and you'll be able to tune in live or on demand for that one. Mike Kinney, we bring you back in, buddy, and here's going to be a big-time matchup in the Big Central Conference this weekend that you are salivating over.
Yeah, no, and so should a lot of other people, no doubt about it. The interesting thing is, this is the first time that Phillipsburg and St. Joe's Metuchen have ever played. It's their first game. But if you're going to set up a first game and you want some people to be interested in that when there's no history behind it, one of those teams be 15 in the state and the other team be the number 19 in the state, and you'll get your eyes on that game. St. Joe's is number 15 in the state. They're having a tremendous year right now, averaging 33 points a game. Justin Scaramuzzo doing an excellent job at quarterback, with a core of receivers who are as talented as any in the conference. Ashton Irving, Jacob Pappas, Tom Myers, and several others are really good receivers. They're so good, as in fact, that Bill Tracy's been coaching, the head coach at St. Joe's. He's been coaching for 25 years, and he's always run a wing T. And he has actually ventured a little bit away from the wing T, running more of a spread because his receivers are so talented. And Scaramuzzo does such a good job of reading progressions and using them. They are pretty much running away from teams. They had one tough game against Elizabeth a couple weeks ago, but other than that, they've had pretty much blowouts. They're that good. Phillipsburg, on the other hand, is Peaburg. Peaburg is going to grind it out. They're going to be tough. They've got an excellent quarterback in Matt Genovese. This guy, over his career, has thrown for 3,500 yards and 35 touchdowns. He runs the ball. They're a very balanced team. He's been starting for 3 years. He is a kid who is not flustered by any situation. And they've got a defense that's going to swarm to the ball and play tough and come up with big plays when they have to. And they've had to the last 2 weeks. Since they came off a loss against Ridge 3 weeks ago, tough game. They almost came back and tied the game, but they lost to Ridge, which we're seeing as an excellent team. They've had to come back the last 2 weeks. They've taken leads against Hillsborough 2 weeks ago, and they took a 1-touchdown lead last week against West Orange on the road. But they had to really hold tight in the second half to hold off both teams. They won 2 tough games. Good solid teams, Hillsborough and West Orange, but not top 20 team. So Phillipsburg now is going to face a team that has been first quarter, second quarter tough, first quarter, second quarter prolific, and they're going to have to play that really tough defense for 4 quarters and be a little more productive into the second half with their offense. That's probably been Phillipsburg's. That's not probably. That has been Phillipsburg's trouble the last 2 weeks is their offense sustaining itself in the second half after getting off to a nice start, because St. Joe's is not only playing great offense, but they're playing great defense too. So it's going to be an interesting situation here. These two teams playing for the first time, and St. Joe's playing their best football in program history, and Phillipsburg having a history to be able to reach back and get things done right, even when things aren't going all that well, because it's just such a great tradition.
Those are 3 of the great platter of football games that are going to be on display this entire weekend in New Jersey. Again, a lot of games that are going to be shifted more to maybe a Thursday night feel because of the Jewish holiday later on over the weekend. So be sure to check your schedule. Also, fans, remember that from the opening kickoff to the end of the season, NJ.com's award-winning staff of reporters and photojournalists put you in the middle of the action for in-depth coverage of all these games and other games around New Jersey, including photo galleries, recaps, and stats. Visit NJ.com/HS Sports. So that'll do it for another edition of the Jersey Blitz. I'd like to thank all of these great writers who joined me here today: Luis Torres, Ryan Patty, Mike Kinney, Bill Evans, Joe Zadalis, and of course our engineer, Brian Dekine, for his help in getting us over the goal line. So be sure to join us next week for another edition of the Jersey Blitz, NJ.com's high school football podcast. For everybody here, I'm Dan Long, and we'll see you next time on NJ.com.